Hello there survivors, welcome back to another build tutorial in ARK Survival Ascended. Today I will be showing you exactly how to build this all-in-one castle base using the Castle Craft Custom Cosmetic, or at least that's the way I've designed it and that's the way I recommend building it. You could probably try to build this without the cosmetics, maybe make a few changes to make it look more suited for something without this skin, or maybe even a different skin. But as I said, it's definitely designed to be used with the Castle Craft Custom Cosmetic. This base is a huge build, but it should be possible on official servers within the building limit, using a lot of large walls and some options for you to leave out certain sections or little details which I will mention during the tutorial itself. But the base features everything from a nice dino pen basement for all your breeding needs, and even the bio grinder to get your kibble, with large towers that you could use for all your survival needs, but also as a park spot for some of your flying friends. Of course, a big courtyard to easily teleport in or just leave out some of your tames, and some big buildings for your crafting, storage needs, and of course your living quarters. And it even has a little greenhouse and a cemetery for some of your fallen tames, and everything else that you might need in your ARK adventures, and it all in a cool medieval castle, so you can really rule the world, whether it's on Ragnarok or any other map of your choosing, as long as you find a decent spot where you can fit this epic castle. As always, if you enjoy seeing these build tutorials and you want to continue to see more, please consider liking the video. It really helps me out a lot. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, feel free to leave some suggestions for future builds you'd like to see down in the comments below. Besides using the Castle Craft Cosmetic for most of the structures, I've of course used some additional mods for some detailing, but they are totally optional, so you can definitely leave them out if you don't want or can't use them. I've used JVH Landscaping for a bunch of the plants. I've used some of the Astraeos cosmetics. I've used Cozy Cabins cosmetics, Amissa cosmetics, and even the Viking Builders cosmetics. But as I said, the only one I would really recommend, and I kind of think you should use, is the Castle Craft skin. The others are all optional. Now, this is going to be a very long tutorial because it's quite a big and complicated build, but I've tried to do it in such a way you could build it in survival and slowly start using and living out of some parts while still working on the others. So keeping that in mind, first we're going to lay out the foundations for the entire thing, so you know for sure that this build will actually fit wherever you plan on building it. And then we'll start with one of the towers so you could live out of that whilst working on the rest of the base. Adding these tables for your tames, then the whole basement, and then the main structures like the main keep, the main townhouse, the greenhouse, and of course the last tower. So just keep that in mind because it was a very long recording for me, and if you're trying this in survival, it's gonna be quite the adventure. But good luck, and just remember, by the end, you'll have an epic castle to live out of. So I want to be able to build this castle in a way that if you're trying to do this in survival, you can kind of do part by part and live in the parts that we have finished. But one thing you will need to check before we do anything is, of course, to make sure that the base foundations can be placed down in the spot you're choosing. So what I would do is at least lay down the outlines first so we can see if the spot we've chosen fits, and you might want to check especially with filling in if that is all possible, or at least find a decently flat spot that you think is big enough so that you don't get any surprises like halfway through. So please do check if the spot is big enough. So we'll start with laying down the foundations of the entire build. The castle is going that way. So we're going to start with the tower that is at the end, and we're going to count the triangle here on the outside. So we want to have 2 triangles facing the outside. Then we want to have normal foundations next to that, just 1, and then we'll repeat that pattern. So 2 of those triangles on the outside, and then again 1 foundation on each side, and we'll just take that entire shape around in a circle. That's going to be the tower at the very end of the build. So that is the tower at the very end, and it's also kind of a good starting point of maybe building this first, living out of the tower until you finish the rest of the castle build. So against these two triangles that face towards our big open flat space, that's where we're going to add the next part of the foundation. But we're going to do something special because it needs to be centered with the middle of this place. So in order to make that work, we need to kind of move the snap point a little bit. So for now, it's better to clear out a little bit of the section over here so that we can move that snap point, which we're going to do it like this. We're going to have a quarter piece, two of them just like that. Then we can remove those temporary pieces again. Now, if we snap this triangle to it, we have moved it by half a block basically. And then if we bring this over, you can now see that we have this piece again right there in the middle, and that is the exact piece that we need. So basically you need that triangle right here in front of it. Once you have that, you can of course repair that tower shape again, and now we need 5 of these triangles facing the tower. So that's the one, then we have 2 on this side, and we want to have 2 on the other side as well. And that means that this is now centered with the rest of the castle that we'll be building. And then it's time to build the side here. So we're counting these sides. So that's the 1, 3, and we want to go until we have 6 in total right over here. And we'll actually do the exact same thing here on the other side. So that's 3. And we want to make sure that we get 6 in total. That is the end shape here of the castle that is connected to the tower. So we'll continue laying down the main shape of the castle. We'll take out a normal foundation. Then first, we're going to start by adding 6 more of these foundations right over here. So it's extended by 6 more. Afterwards, we're going to extend it once again by 4 more. So that's 10 in total. Then after those, we have 2 last ones here to add. The reason I have it in these sections is because, well, these are all separate sections for the build, but one length here for this wall. So in total, this is 12 foundations that we've now added. Then over here, we can go into triangles again, and we're going to have 3 of them facing the outside here. So 3 of them facing us like that. And then afterwards, we'll have 3 normal foundations going out in front. And then attached to that part, we can actually make a little square, a 3 by 3 square. And we'll have a small edge of triangle pieces at the very end of this shape. We're going to continue then next to that 3 by 3 square that we've made. So we're still going this way. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 foundations. So a line of 6 foundations right next to that square connected up. And then we're going to go into triangles again here on the outside. We're going to go for 3 of them here, 3 of them here facing the end, and then turning around with 3 more of them on this side. Then of course we can once again take out our full foundations, have another 6 of them going across. So this should line up with where we started. And then this shape is also going to get those 3 triangles going in, 3 triangles going across, and then just for good measure, we have those 3 triangles meeting up with that shape. So that's the main keep is going to be located right over there. Okay, then right here at the end, of course, it's time to start connecting back up to where we started. We're going to start right over here, and we're going to add 4 foundations to the side like this. And then if we go from here, we should be able to just bring out our full foundations all the way across, and it should meet up with that main foundation that we had over at the end. Now, if we really wanted to, we could already prepare some shapes for buildings that are going to be here. So from this foundation, we want to make sure that this is going to be 8 long in total, and then we can bring it across. So that's going to be one of the main buildings that we'll use. Then over here at the other side, we have these 2. And then after that, we're going to have a little shape of 4 by 4. That's going to be another tower. So that building here is going to be a nice tower. And then in between that, we'll have a connecting bit between these 2 buildings. which is just going to be too wide, so we can kind of lay that out. It kind of helps you visualize what the actual castle is going to be like. Of course, it's going to be raised up way higher, but at least for me, it kind of feels nice knowing roughly what is going to be where. Now, this isn't the full foundation yet. Of course, we have a few more additions to make. Here on this side, we want to add some things as well. So right here on this corner, we're going to go in by 1 and then we'll expand by 2. Then we'll bring this across by quite some way, all the way, of course, here over to where it meets up with this part. Then we can kind of mirror that situation. So we'll have 3 triangles here, and then over here we can kind of expand it by roughly 4 before we bring it back together. This is basically going to cover the staircase coming down along the side of the building. And then all the way here at the front, we want to still make a little bit of an addition by having this part stick out just a little bit like that. So it's 2 on the outside on each of these sides. So that's going to be the whole staircase, kind of leading us up to the castle. And then we still have these stables that are going to be here on this side. So from here, we want to bring this out by 3 foundations, the same over on that corner of the triangles, and then bring this across. So it's a 3 by 6. Here on the front, we do want to have some additions. So we'll turn this into quarter foundations. We'll have 2 of them here, 2 of them there, and then we'll leave a gap of, well, 2 quarters. So 1 normal foundation before we add in some more. We want to have 4 quarter foundations there. And we also, we also want to leave that gap of 2 here. And then we will have another one of those. So 2 gaps, well, gaps of 2 quarter foundations, so gaps of a 1 full foundation in the middle of these to get this layout going. So that's the layout for the castle. Probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but it's better to check this beforehand to be sure that you can actually build the castle wherever you plan on building this. Do keep in mind that if you want to make very sure that you can build here, you would be best, of course, to fill in this entire foundation so that there's no doubt in your mind anymore that you can fill this in. Although, of course, if there's a few pieces where you can't place down a foundation, you can easily fix those with some ceilings. As long as you have foundation support for this entire shape, we will be able to build our base. So a little bit of an overview. We have the main keep there. We have one of the main buildings over here. Then we have a tower here and a tower there, and the stables here. And this entire thing will have a downstairs or dungeon area, which can be used as the dino pen. So there's a few options, of course, to start with. I wouldn't start with any of these just because you have to raise up the entire thing before the dino pen becomes available. So to make it easier on yourself, you're probably best off building the tower first and living out of that as your survival base until you slowly finish the rest of it. And then I would build the stables second, so you have a place for some of your smaller tames, maybe your gathering tames, to be safely parked as long as you work on the rest of the castle. So for now, before we start building the tower first, I will actually go around and start filling in the foundations wherever we've placed the outlines, just so that, well, we know for very sure that we can actually build here, but also just to get that step out of the way. Again, you could also decide to build the tower first so that you have your little survival outpost first before you start filling in the rest of the foundations. I'll leave that up to you. We will, of course, lose the guides that we've made because we're doing this, but in the end, really what matters is that you know for very, very certain you can build the castle here before you start putting in too much time. So it's a good and safe thing to do just in case, so you are very certain of yourself that you can in fact build wherever you have chosen to build. So yeah, for now we'll just go around the entire shape, making sure that we fill in the foundations wherever we can, and well, we should hopefully be able to do it everywhere. Of course, you have to follow the shape, so in certain of these areas we'll have to use the triangles, of course, to fill in the shapes, but it should all be relatively self-explanatory with the guidelines that we've made. that we can kind of follow around and just fill in the entirety of this structure to build our great castle that I mean, I think it's going to be a pretty cool base if you do end up managing to build the entire thing. There we go, we have that entire thing laid out, so we only need this part at the front to get our foundations, and then at least we know for sure that the place we picked is the right one, which is definitely a very reassuring thought. You don't want to get too far into this build and then discovering that the place you've picked doesn't actually quite fit the giant castle that we're about to build, which would be a very horrible surprise. So there we go, we have the entire main shape filled in, and then of course we still have the tower here at the end, which is also the first thing we'll end up building. So we'll go around filling in those foundations right now. There we go, fill all in and go all the way around just like that. So we have the entirety of the foundation in place, and this is pretty much the entire shape of the castle that we'll work on. Okay, so as I said, we're going to work on the castle tower here first, so you can use that as a base until you finish, well, the rest of the build. So we want to have a large wall on these corners that are one foundation. So we'll go around, fill those in for all of these sections, and you can see that's how tall the first layer will be. Quite a bit of space already. Then first off, we'll start here with the entrance, which is going to be the door, of course. We actually want to make sure that we face these outward, which might look weird now, but you have to remember that technically this is the entire main build and this tower is attached to that, so it makes more sense to face the things this way. Then we want to have a doorway and a door right there, of course, so that we have a point to access the tower. And then on top of that, we just want to continue to fill in this wall until it's the same height as those other walls that we placed down. And then alongside these large walls, we actually want to bring up our pillars and make sure to connect them down into the ground. Then we want to snap here to the foundation so that it faces the right way. So basically we want the pillars to be aligned with the large walls that we've placed down, which is best done by snapping to the foundation underneath and adding them up alongside them. So yeah, we're just going to go round, add these in. Now there is some few details that we can add on the outside. We'll wait with that until the end of the castle building, so that maybe if you're working on official, you can decide whether or not you want to add those little details, or that your structure count might be quite high up there. So for now, we just want to basically follow these large walls and add in the pillars around them to give a little bit more structure to this tower already, and kind of divide it up into these separate sections. Then we want to take out all walls again, and we want to have a layer at the bottom of the triangle sections between all large walls. And to continue filling in those, we'll add 4 quarter walls on each side, not over there, along each side, to basically shape up where we're going to be adding some of our windows. So slowly we'll go our way around, trying not to misplace too many of these quarter walls, and we'll just kind of shape up where our windows are going to be, slowly going all the way round. As for the windows, it will depend. I of course built this using the Castle Craft Cosmetic in mind, but if you're building it without it, you might want to change up the design a little bit. So if you're building it without it, you probably want to have a stone doorway and then a short doorway on the top, and then have greenhouse glass doors in the middle to make your custom windows. If you're going to use Castle Craft, however, you'll have some cool skin options if you just use 2 of these window walls above each other. So again, it depends on what you're using, but we have designed this for the use with the Castle Craft skins. We then want to fill in these with actual windows, because you can skin those to be nice glass textures. And then on top of that, we just want to finish of wall sections for all of these bits. So basically we're completing the first layer of the tower here. So we just want to make sure that we can snap these to the right spots if it will let us. There we go. And then we'll have a 4 high tower to get started with, but of course that's just the very start. Now we want to start working on the next layer. We'll start by laying down our ceilings first. So first of all, we'll have our triangles here, basically mirroring the shape that we have above us. So for now we want to go up to that point pretty much. Then for making it a little bit easier to walk around, we can of course already add in some of these full ceilings in between, just so that you can actually reach up here a little bit easier. But very importantly, we're going to start building the staircase right from there. So we want to get some stairs out. We will have one over here. Then of course we will follow the shape of the building. We will have another staircase coming down from that layer. Then we'll have our triangles again going across the window. And then slowly but surely we'll make our way all the way down. And we do this just so that it stays, of course, within the boundaries of the walls that we have created. And we have a nice staircase coming all the way down to us. We can, of course, then add in or railings along the side of this, and well, you can see you get quite a lot of space in this. So early on this is a great place to kind of just live out fully, but eventually you can still have like an industrial forge or something in here without any issues. Now that we have the staircase in place, of course, it already becomes a little bit easier to move up and down, and we can continue working on this tower. So for now we'll start laying down the rest of this well, floor. Basically we want to kind of fill in these gaps around the staircase. What we want to do is we want to have the triangle here, and then we want to have these 2 triangles. So we're going to have a railing along the side so that you can easily go down into the stairs without bumping your head. And the rest of this shape, of course, we just want to start filling in with all remaining pieces so that we can start working on the next layer of the build. So yeah, basically that is the bottom of the tower, but we're gonna of course go a little bit higher still. So first of all, we want to have another large wall on top of these sections. So basically where we had the large walls before, we want to add them in again, and we can go all the way around the entire build to do so. So again, they're going to be 4 high. We can then also continue our pillars. We're actually going to raise them up with 2 extra ones. So again, this section is going to be quite tall and give you a bunch of space to utilize again. So yeah, we want to first start off with raising up all of these pillars all the way to the next layer, which is also going to be the top layer, which can also be used as some kind of aviary to park your flyers up there, which is of course very helpful. So yeah, we'll go around adding in these pillars. Gives instantly a little bit of shape to it. Actually, we need to make sure that we are raising them up to the right height, so they need to be 2 higher than the large wall all the way around us. Let's not mess that up, otherwise the tower is not going to be the right height. So yeah, we'll fill this all the way up just like so. Then first of all, here on the side where we have the doors below, we can now turn around these walls because now they are facing the outside. So we want to have 4 more quarter walls here, and we're going to have another entrance here. Of course, doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment, but in the future that works out onto the courtyard of the castle. So we want to already have that in place. If you want to, you can of course just fill in the wall normally for now, and then maybe later on decide to add the actual door in there if you want to. Again, I'll leave that up to you. And then above that entrance, we want to have a layer of quarter walls. We can then raise them up a little bit to the same height of the large walls and come across with more quarters just like this. again, we're going to make a window for Castle Craft. It can just be 2 of these, and otherwise you want to go for that same custom shape. So again, just to demonstrate, this would be the custom shape for the window if you're not going to use Castle Craft. And then instead of using normal doors in there, use greenhouse doors so that it looks like a window still. But for us, we're going to go with these shapes because we can skin them to some nice windows. And then the last 2 layers here, we can just fill in as normal walls. And we don't want to forget about adding in the windows right there too. So that's that side completely done. We can then take out our walls and of course make sure to raise up these parts above the large walls so that they go all the way up to the top of these different sections to make our very tall tower a little bit taller. Now, an optional little bit of detailing here on the opposite side from the entrance is building a little extension here. Again, for official, you might want to consider this. I don't know if you're going to run into issues with the structure limit. It also kind of depends on how much you're going to put into the base. You could, of course, consider removing this later. But for now, we'll build 2 little ceilings here and then 2 walls up on each of the sides. We're building this out of wood. We're going to also skin this into wood just to get a little bit of a different texture going on. We'll have some quarter walls right in there. And then in the middle, we can add a nice window. Get the right snap point. There we go. Then we can have normal walls above that. So we want to have normal walls right over here. We can, of course, add in the window itself. We want to take out our slope walls, slope them up into that building. There we go. And then we want to add in our nice roof so we can have those roof pieces. But of course, we can also expand this with a nice little overhang on all the sides just like this to make it stand apart a little bit more. And then if you want to add a few more details, what you would do is of course have some pillars here on the corners, have some beams going across the bottom here so that it looks a little bit more supported. And then you could potentially also still add some supporting things like this to make sure that it looks like it's properly attached to the tower. And you can instantly see how that makes it a little bit more interesting to look at because, well, it's just less flat this way. And then of course on top of these roofs we want to continue our walls upwards, so we want to just have the rest of the wall filled in, but it does give you a little bit of extra space in there to potentially use as your bedroom until we've built the rest of the castle. Then for these other wall sections, we want to start out by placing down our 2 walls in between each of these large walls that we have to start making that shape a reality. And then we can take out our quarter walls again. We want to have 6 of them going up this time, so a little bit taller than the previous ones. And of course, we're going to do that for all of these sections that are still open, so we want to make sure that we raise these up to the same height. It's also kind of the same height as we had for that window above the door. So again, 6 of them on each of these sides of the tower to get some nice big windows in there to let in some light to the place, but also just to, of course, make the tower look quite nice. So we'll just go around it all the way. Then we can take out our full walls again and we can add the layers above these openings to kind of finish the rest of the shape of this tower all the way around us. So we want to make sure we do that everywhere. And once we've done that, of course, we can switch to the windows and we can add them in so that will be 3 windows on top of each other. Again, if you're not going to use the Castle Craft skins, you know which trick to use now to still make some nice looking windows. There we go. We fill all of those in, and then of course also add the actual windows to them so that we can turn those into glass with the Castle Craft Cosmetic. There we go. That is another layer of the tower. It looks a little bit silly now, of course, but once you start transforming it with the skins, it will turn out very, very nice. Then it's time to start working on the staircase. So from the entrance here, we want to basically stand in front of it, turn to the left, and that's where we want to start the staircase. So the opposite side of the room compared to where the other staircase comes up to the building. We want to then go into these triangles again, and we'll slowly start making our way up. If it will let me get the right snap. There we go. So we're going to go across this little addition that we've made. We can add some railings there, or you could fill in the wall if you wanted to, because you could of course just go for filling this in if you don't want this this little awkward opening there. I'll leave that decision up to you. Either railings or full wall, both are fine. We just want to get the right snap point for the staircase. Slowly start building ourselves a way up to the top layers, of course, to the top of the tower. So again, we'll just kind of follow along the sides, circling around, and then we get to over here. We're still going to continue a little bit, so we have one more layer that we're actually going to add to this, because it's going to be slightly higher, but instead we want to use our quarter stairs. So right over here, we want to have one layer of quarter stairs. Then we want to have our quarter ceilings to fill in the rest of that gap. And actually, we want to go around and add in a few of these quarter walls to raise up the total height of this tower a little bit more. It will all make sense in a little bit. For now, we just want to go around and fill in all of these quarter walls. There we go. And of course, we can also go around the edge of the staircase, adding in all railings to make sure that we don't keep falling off whilst trying to walk all the way up to the top layer of the build. Unfortunately, right now at least, these half railings don't snap to these half stairs, which is a little bit of a shame. Hopefully that will still get added at some point. Now from here, it's time to start filling in the layer of the rest of the tower. So basically filling in the whole shape of the tower. We're going to start here by adding in some of these triangles, following the same kind of pattern we've had all on the previous layers. Of course, making sure not to block off the stairs, so we don't want to build right above that, of course. Which means we can switch to the full ceilings and start filling in the shape a little bit more around the building. There we go. We can have our triangles once again and fill in the center bit over here. Then, of course, we have a few more to add over there. And we have our nice staircase entrance. I probably keep this all open just to make it a little bit more smoothly for you when you're walking above it. So we probably want to just kind of close off these sides, and then we can of course have those quarter railings there to make a nice satisfying entrance to our staircase. This is not going to be it, however. We're going to expand it. So against all the triangles, we want to make sure that we add another layer of ceilings on the outside here as well. Make sure to add them to the right layer. And then of course in between is where we want to add some of these triangles. So basically we're bringing this whole build a little bit outward to the outside of the tower to again make sure it's a little less flat up here. So then before we do anything, we actually want to add a layer of all quarter walls around the outside. And this is why we had to raise up the entirety of the walls by half, because we're just going to add a little bit of details this way. There we go. Now, technically, you could also do this all without of the quarter pieces. Like you could just have this coming outside on the layer that we reached the first time. That might be a good decision for official players. I don't know how close the structure limit will get, especially once you start decorating. But yeah, that would be a way to save structures, I suppose. And you might be wondering what we're going to do now. We're going to add in some of our roof pieces, of course, to make sure that this is all nicely supported. And this will be able to skin into some nice skins with the Castle Craft. There's actually a stair variant so that it doesn't look like a roof, but like stairs going up, which is a nice way of detailing the tower. So we go around like that, but then also we want to, of course, take out our triangle pieces to fill in between the gaps, and that way we get some nice supports for our tower, and it looks very smooth from the outside. Of course, just bringing that layer to the outside a little bit more, adding a little bit more shape to that tower in general. And then once we're here at the top, we want to start adding in our dino gateways, because if we snap these to the outside, we should be able to get some nice arches, especially with the Castle Craft Cosmetics. So we want to just go around and add them on the end, which is another reason why we had to go out with another layer of ceiling, so that it's all 2x2s, and those arches will form the basics for this tower structure. We then want to take out our railings, add them in between, because we can turn those into the battlement trim, which is going to look very, very nice, which is why we needed a layer of quarter walls underneath it to make that all make sense. And now we'll just go all the way around until we have those everywhere. There we go. So that's the start of this tower shape to get it all in place. And of course, we're going to need a few more pillars to connect up for the roof. So first of all, we're going to add some of those pillars in between these. We're not going to see much of them, but we're going to need them to connect our roof pieces against, because otherwise it won't let us snap to the top of these gateways, unfortunately. So yeah, we want to make sure that we add them on all of these corners as nice supports. What I try to do is basically snap them to these full ceilings so that I know they're rotated the right way around. And once we've gone all the way around, we should then be able to start adding in our roofs. So now we should be able to snap the roofs on top of some of these structures, and we should be able to get a start to the roof shape of the building. And we can kind of go around. We skip one each time with these full ceilings. I'm kind of still following the pattern that is below us. So full roofs above full ceilings, and then triangle roof pieces above triangle ceilings. And we'll start getting the whole shape in around the tower right now, just following along like this until we meet the end. And then of course we can alternate again. So above the normal roofs, we'll have our triangle pieces going up the next layer and just raising it up bit by bit until we get to the end. There we go. We then want to fill in the gaps with full roofs again, of course, making sure not to misplace them anywhere. Follow that whole shape round, and then again on top of the triangles is where we'll add another layer of roofs. There we go. All the way round, add our triangles in between these places, just like this. And then the final layer is another layer of these triangle roofs to get the top on the tower. And normally you would go around with maybe adding a layer of these quarter roofs or quarter ramps, but with the Castle Craft skins, there's actually some options for some very nice roof pieces, and all you would need in that case would be some of these pieces at the very end. So what we can do is kind of just go around like that. We kind of need to see if we can get all the snap points. We should be able to get all of them. And I know it looks like there's gaps, but there's a skin that will fill in the gap in between and make a nice little edge to your roof. So that's pretty much how we want to fill this all in. Did I forget any placements? Maybe a few. We'll add them everywhere, and there we go. It looks a little bit silly now, but once you're skinning it it will all make sense. And that is the first tower done, and that's done the tower that you could live out of whilst we build the rest of the whole castle. Now, before we get started on building these stables, we need the back wall, which is where the stables are built against. So from these middle two, we want to make sure that we add some quarter walls right in there. And then in the middle, we want to, of course, get our doorway in, get the doors in, and then we want to raise up this wall. This wall in total should get 3 more on top of them. So it's 4 high in the completion. And then we can have some large walls right next to that, just like this, which is the back wall that we will build these stables against. And just for good measures, we can place a pillar going up right here, and we can build another pillar right over there. And since there's only a small gap here, you might as well add those large walls already to fill in that corner. Again, we're not going to fill the entire thing in. You could if you wanted to, but we're going to build the stables first so we have a nice space for our smaller tames. Here we had 2 large walls. Of course, that means that one was clipping. You might have already noticed it. Sorry, I just noticed it now. Of course, it means that we have quarter walls to fill in that gap, and we'll have quarter walls to fill in this gap, just because otherwise we can't fit in that door there in the middle, of course. Okay, so now we'll work on the stable building here. So first of all, we want to take out our wooden pillars. We'll add 3 of them right here and 3 of them over there. Then we want to have 2 of them on this corner and 1 on those corners for now. And then we'll also have 1 here and 1 right over there. We want to go into our half pillars, add them on top of these ones at the front, so they're 1.5 height, and that's going to kind of give us a little bit of a skeleton for what we're working with. And as part of that skeleton, also here on the inside, after those same 2, we want to have the 3 pillars here and the 3 pillars there. So that's kind of the base structure for the entire thing. We want to also take out our staircase, or stone stairs, and we want to make sure that we get the quarter ones, have 2 of them right there in the middle, and the rest of these as well, so that you can get up and down the foundations into these stables themselves, so to speak. Then it's time to start filling in the walls of this. We want to go 2 high here on the sides. We're using some wooden walls for the stables to kind of set it apart from the main structure, and we want to build up the sides just like this. Then on the inside, we of course want to make these all separate stables, so we'll add a layer of quarter walls going from the wall all the way to the front, and we'll do the same thing right over here, bringing up these quarter walls so that they meet, well, the front wall that we will be building in a little bit. And then we'll have some railings on top of them to give this a little bit more height. And again, this is just so that we have some proper separate stables for all of these sections. Then here in between, we can actually snap a wall to these quarter foundations so that we can have a full wall over there. We can do the same thing over here, so some full walls there. We want to have some double doorways right in the middle of these. That will be the entrances to these stable parts. And then we'll have some quarter walls right next to it, making sure that we go for the alternate version so that they fit the gaps between it. And then in between, of course, we want to add the doors, which we're going to change with the skins to be half a door. There's actually one in Castle Craft, but you could also use the saloon doors from the Frontier skins, of course. Then we want to take out the stone pillars. We want to make sure that we add some supports underneath these pillars so that they still are connected to the ground, and it looks a little bit nicer if we have these pillars. Now, if you're actually wanting to maybe save on some structures, what we can do with our staircase is actually remove these quarter ones, because that's of course 2 different structures. Now that we have those double doors, we can actually snap our full staircases to those, so that we don't have to waste twice the amount of structure. So especially for official players, that might be a more efficient way to do it. Then to continue these walls, we want to bring up those two walls here in the middle. We want to take out our window walls, have them above the entrances, and then we can fill out these last little sides with our quarter walls to fill that all in, so we kind of get the shape of the building. We also want to have our quarter walls right over here on those walls so that we can get a little bit more of the shape of the full building in. Then we want to take out our slope walls or shallow slope walls and start adding in the shape of the full build here. So first of all, we'll build this like here, and we can actually continue these shallow slope walls over there as well. We're going to skin them differently, but at least we can add them in as supports for the rest of the shape of our roofs, and we will start on those right now. We will take out our quarter wooden ramps, bring them here along the front of the building and also here along that side, and we'll do the exact same thing over here against the edge of the building all the way down the front and the side there too. Then we want to bring out our corner pieces, so our ramp corner pieces. We want to have one over here, and then against that we can snap, of course, another piece and basically continue that all the way across the front. We want to get the right snap points so that we can basically go all the way across the front with these kind of shapes for our stables. Then we want to have these quarter ramp pieces again. Should be able to snap them from the pillars up, and then we can also bring these up and down in front of our corner pieces and kind of just expand this so they overhang the front of the building just that little bit to make it a little bit more detailed. There we go. And now that we have that, of course, we can take out our full ramps and start filling in the rest of these stable roofs. That one definitely not. That one also not. I don't know what is going on. We just want to fill this in, and then of course on the other side we have one more layer of the ramps going back down, and there we go. We have the roof in place. We do want to add a few more details here on the inside. Now these are definitely optional, so if you want to save on structures, this is where you do it, but we want to basically run some supportive beams across the top here. So yeah, what we do is just add a few of those in so that it looks like the whole stables is being held up by them. We can also do that over here, and then another one over there so that those supports are going all the way through. We also want to add in some supports here along the front to give a little bit more shape to these stables and a little bit more details. There we go. Just looks a little bit nicer that way. And then the final few details is to start adding in some beams here across the top. We also want to make sure that we attach one more here at the end, sticking out on both sides. And we also want to do that here on the front. So we want to make sure that we have two of these beams for each of these little sections of the stables. Just to add a little bit more details, we want to take out our slope walls, add them underneath as some nice kind of support. Then we'll take out our shallow slope walls and we'll do the exact same underneath those sections to also add a few more details to our little stables building. And then the last few details that we want to add is basically some railings between these sections here on the front, just to add that final little touch. And there we go. We have some nice cozy little stables that you can park your horses in, or, you know, similar smaller creatures. So now that we have the tower and the stables, it's time to start working on raising up the entire castle grounds, because that's what we'll need to work on any of the other builds, and at the same time that will give you this entire shape here as a basement, as a dino pen, or whatever you want to do with it. So to get started, we'll actually go here to this corner and we'll place down our pillars, making that 4 high in total. We'll also do that right over here and right over there to just give a little bit more structure. Then we can take out our large wall, place one down here, here, and 2 over there on these sides, and 2 over here on that side too. Then here at the front, we want to also bring up our pillars just like that around those corners. And we want to fill in the top layer here with our walls. And then in between that, it's where we can add in a nice gateway. And of course, in front of that, we can add some stairs so that you can enter it. This is actually the one of the entrances for this bottom part. So we want to add in our gates so that you can get in and out and close it off. For the internal structures of here, I do have a little bit of a way to make it look nicer eventually. But since it's also the easiest place to save on some structures, since that's the basement, no one is really gonna see that much. We'll do that at the very end so that if you're running out of structures, or you want to keep some extra space for your decorations inside of your buildings, you'll be able to save on that. And before we finish the rest of this wall, we're actually going to look here at the top and start working on our walkway or staircase up to the castle grounds first. So we'll fill in these triangles bits here, then we'll take out our full ceilings just like so, and over here we'll expand it by 3 more. Now after those 3, we want to take out our ramps, and we want to actually add 4 of them here, so that should end right where those foundations go from normal ones to triangles. And again, we'll make this 2 wide. After that, we can take out our triangles and basically follow the shape of the foundations here, and we'll also make this 2 wide, so that's our staircase taking a slight turn. Then we can take out our ramps again, slowly bring them back down. They should meet up with these foundations, and of course you can bring them all the way down into the ground below. There we go. So that's the staircase coming up with the Castle Craft skins. There's actually options to turn a ramp into a shallower slope of a staircase, which is quite nice to have. So then we'll be working here on this section. After 2 foundations, we'll add in a pillar going up. We'll have another pillar going up right over here. Then after 2, we'll have another one, and then here on this corner. Then the next one, of course, is going to be over there. And then potentially you could have one right here and a little half pillar on top of that. The same here actually on the other side, just as some small details. We could also add the half pillars on top of these parts, ending with this one here, because we can add some nice details along the staircase. Then we actually want to take out our railings. We want to start adding them here on the top for all of this section here at the top where it's still flat. We'll turn them into battlements, which will look quite nice. And then here along the staircase, of course, they will just be turned into normal railings, but we still want to prevent ourselves from falling off all the time. So we'll just slowly follow this shape down. It might let you, it might not let you do it for the last one here. And we actually also want to make sure that we do these 2s before it connects to the rest of the build we'll have. Then over here, we actually want to add in a little window just over here, and another one right there, just to fill in those walls. And then we can actually start filling in these sections of the walls with proper walls. Of course, the rest will need to do quarter walls and shallow slope walls. Over here, we can fill in this entire section for as far as we can. Over these parts, we don't want any full walls. Here in this middle one, we can do a large wall, and for these 2 we're going to add in a little bit of an extra detail. Now you could just do large walls here and just fill this up with normal walls, but for additional details we can make it a little bit more fancy by placing down a nice gateway in there, and we'll basically create some places to get some statues in. Again, this will take up a little bit of your structure count, so if you're short on structures, you could always remove these and make them into flat walls instead, just to save on your structures. Over here, we kind of need to have some of the wall in place first, so we can snap to that. So we'll add these shallow slope walls and the quarter walls, and then we can also create this little shape above it. So we have 3 of these triangles above the doors, and with that we can create some walls going down and basically creating a little outlet for a statue to be placed in, which will definitely look very cool from the outside to add in some proper detail. But yeah, of course it does add a few extra structures to a already big build. So this is definitely one you could go without if you want to save on some. So we make these boxes. We'll have some nice windows in there too. We can actually fill these in, and then we might as well fill in those. Probably add some like dungeon windows to these, because this is kind of facing the basement, of course. And then we want to have some railings around the front sections of those. And then if you place down a deco box with the Castle Craft skins, you can have some very nice little statues in there to add as a little detail along the side of your building. For now, we're going to focus on filling in the rest of this wall. So we'll have some of these quarter walls in places where we need them, and afterwards we should be able to fill in the remaining gaps with our shallow sloped walls all along the sides, if it will let me. There we go, just like this. So that's the entirety of this wall filled in. And then over here, don't forget to add this one. The rest will cover as soon as we build more of the wall structures up. But for now, that is the staircase that we needed. And we'll also kind of finish this little section here. For this one, we'll leave that open for now. But along these edges, we want to make sure that we also add in our railings, which are going to be our battlement. And then this last one here, we want to keep open for now. We'll figure that out a little bit later. So the next part we're going to be building is actually, on top of it is going to be like a little garden or like a little graveyard for your fallen tames. First off, we want to add another gateway here, which is going to be another one of the entrances. And if the landscape would still allow it, you could, of course, add some stairs to it. But for mine, it's kind of already flush with the landscape. So we don't really need to do anything else. Then we want to add in some walls. So we can have 3 walls up here and 3 walls up there. Then we want to snap our triangles to it. So right on top of this, we'll have some triangles and we'll have some railings around the sides of this little part. Then the next part we can of course expand. It's going to be that little 3x3 box here. So we just want to fill that all in, and then we can bring out our triangles again to follow that same shape. We want to bring this all across just the same way. So this is also 3 wide, kind of just following along. And then here at the end, we want to go 2 wide and then again 3 deep so that it matches up. So that's going to be a little garden area, which is also kind of like a potential area for a graveyard if you want to honor your fallen tames. Next up, we want to make sure that we kind of fill in a little bit of this shape, of course, because we have now a gap between the staircase and these new ceilings. So first off, we're going to go to this corner, add in a pillar here, add in a pillar over there, and then the final one is going to be right here on that corner. Now here on the inside, it doesn't really matter too much, of course, but we want to at least cover up those parts. If you really want to, you can already add a little bit of structure in here by maybe adding a door like that. But for the rest of this, we just kind of want to make sure that we fill in these walls by bringing them down just like so. And then over here, we can at least have these 2 filled in. And then to finish off this little garden or graveyard area, we want to make sure that we add in these walls over here. Same along there. And then 2 more along this side. And then finally along this side of the garden too. So 3 walls right over here so that this little garden part is completely closed off. This is what we're going to use for where the staircase is. So for now, we'll leave this open as a little bit of a reminder that we still need to do something there. Time to continue here over on the side of the main keep. First of all, we're going to build some large walls on those corners. Same over there. We'll keep the middle ones open for now. We'll do that on this side here and this side over there 2. Then here, we just want to have 3 of those large walls to fill in that little segment. The reason that we're doing it like this is because we're going to be adding some windows. So we'll have 2 normal walls here and then a normal wall at the top. Then here we're going to do that the other way around. So 2 normal walls and 1 here at the bottom. That's going to be the same for these last remaining sections too. So basically, we're going to have a bunch of little dungeon windows so that we can get some light into your dungeon. Yeah, just to make sure that you can see a little bit better without needing to rely on like other sources of light all the time. There we go. That's the basic start. Then of course we want to have a pillar right here on this corner. We also want to make sure that we have that pillar going on the front here of the building. Same over there on that side. And then of course we can already place in these pillars over here just like that. And then of course for good measure you could also add one right here in that spot. And you want to continue that to the ground because we can still barely just see it, but it's always a nicer detail. Then we can continue filling in. We want to have 2 large walls here. We'll leave an opening in the middle, 2 more large walls there. We also can have some large walls over here, and on this side we can have 2 on each of the corners there. Then we get to this middle part. We want to have 1 large wall here, leave a gap of 2 large walls in the middle, another gap of 2. Then we want to have 1 here, 1 there, and another one over there in the corner. So we're kind of dividing up the room, and that is because we're going to have more of those places for statues. Again, if you want to save on structures, you could also just have the large walls everywhere instead, just to fill up most of this place. Then we want to start adding in some pillars in certain sections. We of course want to have some pillars here. We want to have them along these sides too. So we just want to make sure that we bring in all these pillars going all the way up and down from our structures. There we go. Just to kind of create some of these different sections of our build. And then actually in this part, so that is after the first 2 gaps, we want to have another pillar right here in the middle, because this is going to signal the end of the building that it's going to go here, and then this is just going to be part of the normal structure. So what we want is bring out some normal walls and snap them in between. We want to snap them in between here too, and we can then of course continue that for all of these gaps that we have. We also want to make sure that we have them up here. And over here, we can also still add in those pillars coming down, just like so. And then we'll have one right here in the middle there too. Then over here, we want to make sure that we add them over this spot, because now that we have those walls at the top, we can make sure that we can snap them in the right orientation. And then over here at this corner, we want to also add in our pillar. Then of course we can start adding in some of these battlement trims. So over here we want to make sure that we have a layer of our railings going all the way across, except for this last final bit. And then of course over here we have this pillar, because that's going to be where our building will be. Now, if you're going to add in these details, of course, we want to have our gateways in here again. That is how we're going to make those details happen. So we want to have the gateways, and then in front of the gateways, of course, we're going to have some railings to close them off. Again, this is to have some nice statues to break up these big walls. But as you can see, it does require a few extra structures to get this done. So if you want to save on structures, you can definitely leave all of them out, or maybe pick and choose a few that you want to have as details and leave out the others in case, yeah, you want to save some of your structure needs. There we go. We can bring down the walls right from these side bits just to create these little inlets that can house our statues. So we'll just go around and create all of them at the same time. There we go. Slowly going all the way around our building. Just like that. Final one over here. And now that we've done all those, we can change this one to the window. And of course, then here in the middle, we want to make sure that we add in a little window so we can have a little bit of a dungeon light coming in. There we go. We want to add in the doors or the windows to these ourselves. And then finally, we can fill in the rest, of course, with some normal walls to close off the gaps. Now, if you really wanted to, you could raise them up all the way to the top, but that would require even more structure. So probably I would just leave it as is, because you're not going to really be too bothered about that, I don't think. There we go. That gives us basically the entire outline for the castle shape, and we can start working on laying down the grounds of our castle and our keep and everything. So basically we want to follow around the shapes that we had before, but this time with our ceilings to get the castle grounds in place. So we'll start all the way here at this end, and well, yeah, it is really just a matter of kind of filling in all the different shapes. And of course over here at this end there's not much to worry about. Now we can finally reach the door to that tower, and as you can see, we'll have a pretty sizable basement to this castle that you can use for whatever needs you have, but it should allow you a pretty decent amount of space. So definitely at this stage, if you're doing this in survival, this is where life is going to get a lot easier, because you'll have a bunch of new space whilst you're working on this castle. So yeah, for now we just want to start filling in this entire shape. So we are going to bring this all the way up to those walls that we placed before, which means we have a little gap here. There's, for now, we want to at least have those two walls here so that we can fill in that gap. Then we can of course continue our mission of filling this entire shape in, which does require quite a little bit of work, but it is for a good purpose, because after this it is building the rest of our beautiful castle. But for now we just need to get around, get all of these structures in place. And there we go. Now we're gonna fill in the entirety of the shape. We will at some point make a staircase over at the keep, so keep that in mind, that at the keep side we're gonna have at least a staircase. So that's where we're starting here, but you can see how much space this is already gonna add to our base, and especially since everything below it you can now already safely start using as part of your base, because that's now closed off. So yeah, nothing is really gonna get there anymore. Of course, we can already get up to the next layer with the staircase in the tower or the staircase on the outside, but it is a little bit easier if we also have a staircase on the inside. So right over here, we want to place a normal slope wall right there, and that's where we're going to connect a staircase to. So we want to bring that up by 4 in total, which is going to bring us right up in the middle of the main keep. And of course, we're going to want to have some railings around that, which means then if we're looking at the ceilings around, we want to make sure that we get this kind of shape in with some railings around the edge. And that is how you can always still get from the keep into your basement and have some easy access to whatever you plan on having down in your castle dungeons. But now we can at least peacefully start filling in the rest of the shape. Here at the end, of course, we'll have a few more triangles to follow around the shapes of the castle. There we go. All the way around like so. And then, of course, over here on this section, we'll also still have a section with a few more triangles connecting up the different shapes of our castle build. So for now, we'll just follow along, fill those all in. And as said before, oh, we don't want to misplace those. And as said before, right here at the garden side, this is where we'll have an actual way into the garden. So we want to have a little quarter ceiling right there. We want to change into the quarter stairs, have them come down like so. Now we can also fill in that wall. It was just more so that we knew exactly where we still needed to add something. We can have some quarter walls coming down from those, and then have a slope wall right next to it. And if you want to have a little bit more detail, you can even add a pillar in there. Now, if you wanted to, you could have a pillar there temporarily, so that you could have some railings snapped to it until you get the right one. Then you could take away that pillar, and you can add some quarter railings here to kind of, or half railings, to fill that all in. We probably then want to have a pillar over there, which is going to be used for all battlements. And we can then have the rest of the battlements going along this side to kind of create that little section separately from this. We can also make sure that we add the battlements around this edge of our gardens. We definitely don't want to have that one here. There we go. So now we have a little garden slash graveyard fenced off and connected up to the main part of the main castle keep. And you can see the amount of space that we have once again acquired by placing down all these walls, all of these ceilings, to create the shape of the whole castle ground again. But you can also see a little bit of the layers coming into the shape to make it a lot more interesting. And then next up, before we start actually working on the main keep, we will start working on the main entrance to the castle grounds. We want to have a gateway here. So right here, centered with this part. And that is going to be the main entrance to our castle grounds once we're fully done. But for now, we can at least place down the gate. Right over here, it means we can raise up this by 3 walls in total. There we go. And then over here, we want to do the exact same thing. So those two are going to be part of our beautiful castle wall. We'll raise up these pillars, and then in between, we can fill up these. We'll leave the bottom one open for now, because we'll have some nice windows, and we're going to change that into arrow slits to kind of fit the defensive feel of it. And then on top of here, we're going to have battlements. So we want to make sure that we have railings going across that entire section, just like this. And of course, you could have a pillar here, because you could have the corner piece of the battlements that way. But that is going to be the main entrance to the castle grounds that we'll have. For now, doesn't make a lot of sense because it's still open, but we'll have a tower here eventually. But for now, that is what we're working on before we move on here over to the main keep that we'll be building next. Okay, so the main keep is up next, and the first thing that we're going to do is add some of the balconies along this side. So we'll take out our triangles once more, add a shape over there on that side, and add a shape like that here on this side too. Then we can actually bring in our quarter walls, go around the bottom ledge of this, get that a little bit thicker. Same over here. We'll do that all the way around the bottom, because we want to have some nice battlements going around the balcony, and well, we'll need some extra depth to it for that to work. So we want to have those railings around. And then of course, it's a matter of making sure that this is back connected to the main structure with some triangle roof pieces, so it is a nicely supported balcony, which adds some nice views of your surroundings. It makes these walls a little less flat, and also has a nice spot for you to park like a little flyer before moving in to the main castle. Then over here at the end, we also want to add in a little addition. So we'll have one full ceiling over here, and then some quarter ceilings along the sides of it, so that we have a little bit of an extra building sticking out. We want to make sure that we have some beams going around this shape, just like that, which means we can have some half beams here along those sides to kind of divide that all up. And we want to make sure that we have some proper supports underneath this structure, so it doesn't look like it's just floating about. So we want to add 4 of those slope walls right there along the sides. Then here on the sides, we want to make sure that we go up by 2 walls. for both of those. And then of course here at the bottom, we want to make sure that we have some windows, and above it we'll have some more normal walls. Before moving this entire structure into the building itself, we'll have a nice roof above it, and then of course we can go around this shape with some quarter roofs to add a little bit more detail to the shape. There we go. And then we of course want to still support this with having some pillars here on those corners, and that's a nice little addition to the side of the building here. Then it's time to add in some of our doorways. So we want to have a doorway over there to the balcony, doorway over here, and one here in the middle leading up to this side building. Then we can take out some of our walls. We want to add 2 over here, just like so, and then we can raise these up to be 4 high in total. We'll make this shape because we're going to have some windows in between. We can do the exact same shape over here on this side, so we want to fill all that in, and we can add 3 walls up here. Then we can have a large wall on each of those corners to save on some structures. We can take out our windows, add them right in those gaps that we still have, and of course add in the doors and windows on that side. Do the same over here. Here I would actually leave it open because it's just like a little extra room with some nice window views. We of course also want to continue these pillars going up. So from the bottom layer, we want to make sure that continues up along the structure. Same over here to keep that a little bit of detail going all the way up. We can already add them here too, because all of these walls of course are going to be 4 high, which also means that we can have this one over here and that one over there. Now, if we go to the opposite side of the main keep, we can kind of do a similar thing. So first of all, we're going to have a double door there into the, well, the main castle square. And we can have a normal doorway over here, which is going into the next building, which we're going to build right next to it. And then over here, we can actually just have a large wall in the middle. There we go. We can have some large walls here to the side of the doors. And then the rest of it, of course, we want to fill in with some normal walls. Over here, we want to have 2 normal walls at the bottom and then normal walls at the top, because we're going to have windows there again. We're going to fill in this entire layer. And then again, we're going to have windows there. So we can only fill in the bottom 2 layers, so that we can now add windows there and windows at that height. So they're all nicely matching. We can add some doors. I would at least have them here, have some windows in there, windows in there. This one, it's really up to you whether you want to have a door there or not. You could have it, you could not have it, because we're going to have another room there. So it might be easier to keep it open so you can walk back and forth from them quite easily. So then for these side walls of the main keep, we're going to have a large wall right there. We're going to have another large wall on that corner, and then 2 large walls right here in the middle. Then we can have a normal wall at the bottom and at the top of these before we fill in the windows right there in the middle, and of course add the actual windows to them. Again, with the Castle Craft skins, this is gonna look quite cool indeed. And otherwise you can use the trick that I showed for the tower to make some walls if you're not going to use that cosmetic. There we go. We'll do the same thing over here, having those large walls in place, having those windows here in the middle, and then of course filling in these remaining gaps with our normal walls. There we go. We'll fill in the windows themselves, and that is the first layer of the main keep done. But of course that's not all, because it is the main keep. It is going to be quite a big building. Okay, now we're going to make our way up to the second layer. We can actually remove this middle wall, so that is facing the tower, because that's actually going to be a doorway also to the other side and to the other building. Then we can bring out some of our wooden triangle ceilings, and we'll build a little platform up here that ends in this one ceiling facing the rest of the main keep. We can bring out our staircase from there right into the middle of this room so that you have some easy access to it. And then for the next layer up here, we want to make sure that we connect these two sides with, well, wooden ceilings like this. We can then bring out our quarter ceilings again. We can have one more layer connected to that with triangles. There we go. And from there, we want to make sure that we have one triangle in these corners. And that's the one that we're going to use for our stairs. So from that triangle, we're going to connect some stairs coming onto this little platform up here. And then, of course, we want to add a bunch of railings. So first of all, we want to have some over here and attached to these stairs just for, you know, some of our safety so we don't keep falling off all the time. We can do the same thing along these stairs. And then we actually need some half railings. We want to have one there, one over here, and the same thing here over at this side, so that this is all now safe. We can get up with the staircase from that main hall. We can go into the building next to it, which we'll be building later on. And then, of course, we can reach the actual second layer of the main keep, which we can now also make sure that we add all our ceilings to. So first of all, we want to go around, fill in these ceilings for this next layer of the main keep. There we go. And then, of course, our quarters to fill in the last part here at the end. There we go. Filling that all in. Let's not forget these last few pieces. There we go. So we have a whole other layer here to work with for our main keep building. Okay, then first up, what we can do is raise up the pillars. They're going to be 4 high again for this layer. So for all of these pillars for this part of the building, we can start to continue them up to create a little bit of a guideline with our building needs. So again, all of them are going to be 4 high in total, which should give us an idea of how tall this main keep is going to be. Then first up, we're going to actually add in some large walls here on the side where we'll have the next building. So 3 large walls right there. Then here on the side, we also want to add in some large walls, but keep the middle section open. And on the sides of the main keep, we want to just have them in the corners, and then the middle sections are going to stay open. This one, again, we're going to have the side parts have the large walls, middle section open, and we'll have the same for all of these remaining sides. So we just want to fill in the side walls, keep the middle part open. We'll bring out our normal walls and we'll fill in the top layers of all of this. So the top layers are going to get a normal wall connecting all these different sections. And then we want to fill it in with our big windows, because we're going to have a bunch of big windows all around this layer of the main keep, just to give you plenty of light and nice views from this height. So again, just want to go around, fill them all nicely in with our window walls. And then, of course, afterwards, we also need to actually fill in all the windows themselves. So we want to go around, add them all to their walls. There we go. And then we're slowly getting there. I know it looks very weird now, but with the Castle Craft Cosmetic, it will look very, very nice indeed. Now, if you really wanted to add some extra details here, you could have some beams going from one side to the other, kind of connecting up the place to, well, you know, feel like it is all being supported and it will look a little bit nicer on the inside. But again, yeah, if you want to do that, that does, of course, cost you some extra structures. For now, we will focus on the actual roof. So we'll start here in the middle, bring 3 roofs up and 2 wide for now, but we'll bring them 3 down here as well. And we can, of course, do that for these entire middle part of the building. So that will already give us quite a few roof pieces. And the good thing with the Castle Craft skins, there is some variants to still add some like window openings in there without needing to do that yourself. So it's an easy way to get in some extra windows and shapes to the roof. For now, we will continue with the roof with all triangle pieces for these other sides, where of course we will go round to kind of get a rounder shape of the roof, which is quite cool for the building, and we'll follow that all the way around at that side. But of course the exact same thing is gonna be the case here on this side. So we'll fill in all of our triangle pieces and just kind of round off the roof in such a way. And of course with the orange roofs from the castle skins, it's going to look very nice. Now this is still a very flat building, so to add a little bit more detail, we're going to take out our ramps and we're going to add a layer around the outside just to create a little bit of an overhang going on here. So you want to just kind of follow that along all the way till the end for this entirety of the building. And we'll do the same thing over here. And again, this is just going to give it a little bit more shape. Then here on the top, we can actually add a little bit of details. We want to have a half pillar there, another half pillar there, just to kind of create a little bit more shape. And then we can have some railings in between. And then if you add the dungeon skin to these railings, they will make some really nice spikes on the top of your roof. And with that being said, we have the main keep standing tall too, which will already give us quite a bit of room to use. So now you can really start to move into it. And I personally would probably have all of my crafting and storage inside the main keep building, because you have many layers to utilize, and especially a late game when you get daddies, that will be a perfect place. But even the rest of the base, like, you know, you can have your bigger structures in here quite easily on any of these layers, and you'll have plenty of space for the storage and crafting needs. So next up, it's the next big building that we'll be making here. We already placed down the pillar that is going to be the corner of the building, and we actually want to make sure that that is 3 high in total. We do the exact same thing over here on this corner. Obviously, the next corner is going to be in the middle of the keep, so we won't do anything there. But at this side, we want to make sure it is 4 wide and bring up that pillar once again. Over here on this side as well, we'll start with this build. And first of all, we want to also bring up a pillar here in the middle of the building. So 4 here and 4 there. And then we can start working on the actual walls in between these. We'll take out some quarter walls, bring them up the first 2 pillars. Same over here on this side, and actually the same over here on that side. Then we want to leave a gap of a 1 wide wall. So we'll go over here and bring up even more of these quarter walls. We'll build some windows once again using that same trick. So we'll have 2 of those over there, 2 of those over here, and 2 right there. Then we can bring a normal wall in and fill in those 2. Then this gap, which is too wide, we're actually going to expand a little bit by building out with 2 more ceilings. And we actually want to bring out our beams and kind of have a nice layer here across the bottom. We'll do this all the way around this extension too. And just to kind of differentiate the supports of the building with the main building that we'll work on, we can actually do the same here over for the main keep too. Now, if you're running into any issues with your structure limit, then this might be one that you could consider removing. But yeah, it does help set apart some of the sections of these buildings just that bit better. Then over here for this edition, we want to also have some pillars on those corners. Then we can have some walls at the sides and even have some slope walls going up into that building. Then we can bring out our normal walls all the way over at the top layer of this wall all the way through, and we can start working on finishing this little room up. So we'll have some windows at the end. we'll have a nice roof on the top and also have some of these roofs at the sides to expand it. At the front, we want to use all ramps to kind of curve this up a little bit to make it a more interesting one. Over here, we want to bring out the normal walls and just fill in these two to kind of meet up with the main keep. And at the other side here of the building, we're also just going to fill up this entire wall because we're actually going to use the option of building a little greenhouse attached to this. So for now, we'll just fill all of this in. And then we still have the final wall to worry about. Now, first of all, what we want to do is bring up this wall. So that's one from the end. Then we want to have two walls next to it at the bottom, as well as two walls next to it at the top. We'll do the exact same thing over here, except that the middle one here at the bottom is actually going to be a doorway. But for the rest, the shape itself is going to be the same. So at the top and at the bottom, we can have those side walls. Then we can bring out all windows and fill in those gaps that we have remaining. We can then also pick up our normal walls again, have them here in the middle. We want the quarter walls to have at the side here and also at the side on the top layer, because we'll actually have a doorway up here connecting up to the walkway crossing from this building into the tower that we'll be building. And here at the bottom, we actually want to make sure that we have the double door over there. And afterwards, we can make sure that we add in a door over here. We can, of course, add in the windows. Well, we'll do all the windows. I wouldn't really add a door here. You'll see in a little bit why. And you could add a door here. It's kind of up to you whether you want to or not. On this side, however, we definitely want to make sure to add in all of the windows. Then here on the inside, we actually want to have a pillar going up here right in the middle of this entire building. Since this is kind of the basement area, we will fill in this wall to kind of make a nice divider. And then we'll have two of these arches right there to, yeah, again, just make some nice curves, especially once we applied the Castle Craft skins. This is just to kind of give a little bit more structure into this basement area. Then we will take out our wooden quarter walls. We'll add two right over here. Then we can take out our stairs as well. We'll, of course, go for some quarter stairs. We'll have two of them going up. And the rest, of course, we can connect coming down into this little basement area to get these nice stairs in place. Then we, of course, want a little railing around the side. So we'll bring out our wooden railings. We can actually snap to the side of this railing. So just go through all the different snap points until you get the right one going up. And of course, also coming back down just to make that staircase a little bit safer. Then we can bring out our ceilings to start filling in this entire layer all the way round. Of course, around the actual staircase, we will do some things slightly differently. For now, we can just fill in this entirety of the build. Of course, we want to make sure to stick it out by one on the outside on the sides here. So one is going to have a nice overhang over there, and the other one is going to have a nice overhang on this side of the building. Once we've got all that, we want to make sure that we take out all quarters and make a nice shape here around the staircase itself. We probably want to leave a little bit of room here so you can actually get around it. And of course, taking out all railings to make sure that we have a nice railing going around it so you don't just fall down it, but you can easily get up and down already. So first up, of course, we want to make sure that we add in some support. So under these parts that are sticking out, we want to make sure that we add in all of our sloped walls just to get some really nice looking supports for the side of the building. We'll do the same over here, but not all the way through, since we are going to have a building connecting the two in the middle. So over here for now, we want to add in those three right there. And then here we just want to have these two right above that entrance. Again, because we'll have a full building going on in the middle. We also want to take out our wooden beams, and basically we want to go around the entire layer that we have built with a nice beam to start tying it all together for this layer going upwards. So we want to have that in place. Then we want to take out our half pillar, and we basically want to add it every 2 on these sides, and then on this side you can decide whether you want to keep it at every 2 or you could do every 1. Again, if you really want to save on structures, you're probably better off doing it every every other 2 or every other 1, just so that you save a little bit. But you want to have a few of these just as some nice supports, and then of course we can then connect these up with some more beams to create a little bit more structure and a nice little wooden layer before the walls are going up. And especially once we start adding skins, this will start to make a lot more sense and will look very, very nice indeed. But it's also just a nice little way to add details. It does of course use a bunch of structures, so again, if you really want to save on structures, you can of course just use the quarter walls that we'll place in here and not have all these extra beams going around it to kind of support it. Again, I'll leave that up to you, whatever you prefer. But we will have some of these quarter walls going down around the whole build, just as a first layer for this main house. And this house is going to be much more like a proper townhouse than the main stone keep we have already built behind us. So for now, we just want to go around it and fill in all of these little quarter walls until we meet back up with that main keep. Then it's time to start shaping the roof. So first off, we want to place down these 3 walls. We'll do the exact same up the opposite corner, and then we can of course start to bring these up a little bit, and we can have some full walls in between and a nice point at the top. And we definitely do not want to have a slope wall in there. So we're going to have this shape, and then we're going to fill in this layer here. We want to have some quarter walls there, over here, and then the alternate version in those gaps, so that we don't leave any gaps between the walls itself. Then we should be able to bring out our pillars, bring them alongside these quarter walls, and a nice beam here at the top to create this shape. This is going to be a nice window, and to add a little bit more detail to it, we'll bring it in by a little bit here on the inside. We actually also want to make sure that we have some quarter walls going around this entire structure to close that all off, kind of like a little window sill. And then we can have a beam going across here, some half beams over there, and then of course we can have those pillars going up, some half pillars going down below on both sides, and then of course one more beam going in here at the top, and some half beams going in between those sections. We want to then have the little quarter ceilings in there. We want to make sure that we have our quarter walls in the sides of this building, and then more importantly of course we want to have 2 full walls there in the middle with skins. We're going to turn that into a window. If you're building this for some reason without skins, of course that is going to be greenhouse glass, so you can still look to the outside, or if you do have the frontier skin, use those windows instead. We want to take out our little quarter roofs. We should be able to snap to the top here of this pillar and have the roofs going in and meet each other right in the middle above the window. And then of course we can have a little quarter ramp from there on both sides to kind of give a little bit more shape to this window. Then we want to have a little half beam and another one to just kind of stick out there. And if you want to add even more detail, you can have a shallow slope wall underneath as a little bit of support, just again to give a little bit more shape to this whole build. And then we want to have some pillars going up along the side of the building, and that is to giving the shape of this entire front of this townhouse. And then here on the other side we'll also fill something in, so we'll have some normal walls going down just like this, and then here in the middle we'll have a nice window, and then of course we can give shape to this entire building going up, and a nice pillar there on the corner. And of course in the window itself you want to make sure that you add that one here, and then we can work on this side of the building. We can have a window here, we can have a window there. We'll do the same thing on this side of the build, so 2 windows over there. Then we can have the full wall and another wall over there too. Then we can actually bring up these just a little bit. We want to make them 3 high in total. And then in between, we can start filling in some quarter walls. So we'll start with the normal ones there. And actually, in this case, it doesn't really matter. We can just raise up all normal walls, quarter walls, by 4. So they're 2 pillars high. And then above that, we want to, of course, fill in the normal structure again. So full walls. And then we'll have some slope walls on top of that. Should meet up with the same height as the rest of the building. For this inside, we want to have 2 pillars going up, and of course a beam connecting between them. So we want to get that right snap point just to connect that, and then we'll build another one of these nice bigger windows. So first off, we'll have some quarter ceilings there and over here. We can then bring out all quarter walls to go around the outside here of that little box, also going all the way up the sides on both sides of this window. Of course, we can then have our beam connecting this one. We can have one here at the top part. We can of course have our half beams to connect all those beams together with each other, and then it's just a matter of adding in these pillars and of course the half pillars going down below there. And then we want to fill in these walls, which will serve as our windows themselves. Then once again, we can take out all quarter ramps. We can have them here along the sides. Then we want to switch it up to the quarter roofs, same over there. And then of course we want to create that nice custom shape, so some quarter beams or half beams sticking out, and for some extra details, a little shallow slope walls right underneath there for some support. And there we go, we have a nice interesting shape above the window here. And now you just want to make sure that you also fill in these windows with the actual windows themselves. And then of course there's one more side to the building. We want to start by placing some walls here. We want to fill in these middle ones and then repeat that process here as well. So we'll have a window there and another window over here. We can fill in the actual windows, and then we just want to have some pillars. So pillar there and a pillar there. So the middle 2 are kind of separated, just as the other side, but no big window on this side, because again, there's going to be something connecting from that building over to the tower over there. And with that all in place, it means that we can actually start on the roof. So first of all, we just want to go around and bring these roofs all the way across to the main keep. So we'll bring them all the way back here to the front, and once again back into the building. Now with the Castle Craft skins, we can actually add in some additional windows to the roofs. I will show you that later when we're looking at how I've skinned the place. For now, we definitely do want to have a nice beam going across that top layer, and we actually want to have that beam stick out a little bit on the front, and we can even have that shallow slope wall right underneath it. And if you want to add those little extra details, you can of course make sure that we have that little overhang here on the side, and along the edges we even want to make sure that we add in these quarter pieces, in this case the ramps, to give a little curve to the roof, just to make it all a little bit nicer, just like that. And then the other side of the roof is going to be slightly more complicated, of course, but just slightly. First of all, we can start with placing down these roofs as normal all the way through like this. Same here over at the other side. The first 3, nothing special going on. And of course, here at the top, we want to make sure that we make a corner so that it will neatly align here to the extra bit with the window. So we want to make sure that those all meet up. Then we want to take out all half or quarter roofs. We want to have them around the sides there. We of course also want to have them here on the front for a little bit of an overhang. Then we want to go into our ramps, go around the sides like this. Of course, we'll stop right there in the middle. We'll continue that over this side all the way here to stick out by just that one. And we also want to make sure that we add them over here. But if you do have overlapping, you could add one more here. If you don't have overlapping, I don't think that would be possible. But if it is, definitely do add it just for that extra nice detail, so you don't have that little gap over there. And then of course over here on this side, we also want to make sure that we add in the overhang. Again, the final one might be considered overlapping, so if not, you can just leave it out. If you can place it, you can just place that in there. And then of course we want to make sure that the beams also continue on this side of the building, so all the way to the end. And of course the little shallow sloped wall right underneath it to make for a really nice shape. Then we want to take out those slope walls and actually add them in like this, and add in a full wall in that corner. And then the same thing here on the other side, just like so. And there we go. We have a nice building going, a nice townhouse looking build as a good addition here to our castle build. Now on the inside, you could definitely leave it as is, so you have a decent amount of room. But if you wanted to, you could of course add in another layer of ceilings and maybe create a little bit of a bedroom. But I'll leave that choice completely up to you, whether or not you need that extra layer on the inside, or you just want to have a nice big room so you can build some of the bigger structures there if you need to. Now, optionally, you can have a little bit of a detail around this entrance. We will need to replace that wall with some quarter walls instead, just like this. And then we need this little half pillar right up there so that we can add in some of these quarter roofs right above the entrance. And of course, going into these ramps around the side. And then here on the front, we want to have some of our thin pillars just to come down. Then we should be able to remove the half pillar. And if you really wanted to, you could even remove these quarter pieces now. So that now, after we've built the entrance, we should be able to go back to that full wall and no one will notice anything. And of course, here on the top, you could even add in those little beams just to kind of match the rest of the design for a nice little entrance above the door. Then as an option, we can actually add a little bit of a greenhouse right here in the front. So if you want the greenhouse, you can add 3 walls going up like here, and we want to actually make those 2 high and then leave a gap of 2 before you do the same thing here on the other side. And then here at the front, we want to have our greenhouse walls like this. Create a little shape for a door over there, and of course add in the actual door too, so that we have a way into the greenhouse. Some slope walls on top, then of course our roof structures going back into the building. The same thing here on the other side, so that is a way to make a productional greenhouse going. And then we can of course add a few details by having some pillars here on the corners. And of course, having some beams going across the top. We can even make that stick out a little bit more. And if you want to add even more details, we can have some of these quarter roofs on the outside for a little bit of an overhang. We can then, of course, also have these ramps going along the edge to kind of make sure that the roof smooths out and it matches the other roof that we just built. And we want to, of course, do that on both sides of the building. And of course, this only works if you're going to skin it, because otherwise it looks quite silly. But once you skin it, it will look very, very nice. And then, of course, here on the front, you can either have the normal slope wall or the shallow slope wall to give a little bit of an extra little detail there. And there we go. That is a little greenhouse addition right here in the main courtyard of the castle. And with that, kind of all we really need to do is also build the tower and the connection from the tower to this main town building. So now it's time to start this final tower over here, and we want to start right here with a pillar that goes up by 9 in total. That's how high this tower is going to go. So the same is going to go over here, 9 high in total, and this one we actually want to extend to the bottom 2. Then it's going to be a 4x4, so the tower is going to go one further inwards, and again it's going to be a pillar of 9 high, and then the final pillar right over here also will go up by 9 high in total. So that's kind of the height of the tower, roughly speaking, and that's what we'll focus on for now. If you want to make it look a little bit nicer, what I would personally do is have some beams going across those sides so that you have that nice little bit of a divider between those wall sections and the actual tower. Then here on the front, we want to start out by having 2 layers of walls just like this. Then we want to bring up the walls all the way to the top across the side, across the top layer here, and then we can bring it back down here on the other side. Here in the middle, we'll actually have 2 windows just like this. Then we should be able to have a layer of walls. So now we should be at 5 high in total, which is where we want to add in some of these triangle ceilings to create a little bit of a balcony, which also means that we want to have some quarter walls here. And of course, the same thing on the other side, so that we can have a little doorway to that balcony so you can easily access it. And then here at the top, we also want to have some of the quarter walls on both sides. In between those, we'll have a little window. And then here we can just fill in the rest of the wall like that. Of course, we want to make sure that we have the doors and the windows all filled in. And around this little balcony, we want to first go around with some of these quarter walls before going into our triangle roof pieces so that we can have a nice support for that balcony. And then finally, to get some of those battlements again, we'll have some railings going around it so you don't just fall off right away. Oh, and I'm just seeing we definitely want to fill in all the windows, not just the two. Then the 2 sides of the tower, which are pretty much going to be identical. So first up, we'll have a layer of walls going down the bottom. Then we can bring this up by 3 before going across the middle here. And then, of course, we can bring it down there. Then we should be able to go up by another 4. We can go around the top and bring it down with another 3. So basically, we have 2 gaps of 2 by 3 for both these sides. Then on this side we can do almost the same thing. We want to start out by having a little door right there, and then we can do the same shape like we did on the other side. So quite easily just fill that in, bring up this wall on the other side too, all the way around like that. And of course over here we want to make sure that we add in that door so that we have a nice way to get in and out of the tower. Then here in the middle we want to of course have some quarter walls, 4 of them on this side, 4 of them on the other side, just like that. And over here the top layer we want to make sure that we do that all the way, so just some quarter walls all the way around the sides. We can do the same thing here on the other side of the tower, just filling in those sides all the way through. And then here of course just the bottom 2 layers we want to have the quarter walls. Then above these window sections we want to make sure that we get in our slope walls, and of course make sure to fill in the wall all the way so we'll get that little shape. We'll do the same thing here on the other side, making sure we get that in there. Then these bottom ones are just going to be windows, so we want to have our pillars going up along the sides like that. Then we can have some beams going across the top and bottom. Both sides will do the exact same thing. And then of course the middle are going to be windows. Just to make it a little bit more clear, we'll use some wood. If you're not going to skin them, of course use greenhouse glass, or maybe the frontier skin if you have that instead. But Castle Craft will definitely give you the nicest windows. And then this is also going to be a little window with some of the Castle Craft variants. Then at the top, we're basically going to create some balconies. So we want to take out some of our quarter ceilings, 4 of them over here, and another 4 of them over at the other side, which means we can easily have a few supports going on. So underneath, we just want to make sure that we add all those in on the one side. The same thing, of course, on the other side, just making sure that we've got all the supports going on there. Then we can take out our actual pillars. So first off, let's have 2 pillars here on this corner, and then actually we can have 3 of them around the back walls here. It's connecting back into the building. Same over here on the other side, of course, making sure we have those pillars going up. Same on the front, but then just 2 high, and we'll have some beams going around the sides of the shape, just to make it all look a little bit more connected and more supported. There we go. Then for the sides of these walls, we kind of just want to fill them in like normal for all of those different sides. There we go. Then of course we can shape this building up a little bit, so we'll have some slope walls going up into the building itself, connecting up quite nicely like this. Then of course here at the end, we want to make sure that we add in a little window right there on both sides, and then on top of that we of course just want to have a normal wall again. And then for these side sections, we want to make sure that we can add in our full roofs for both of these. There we go. And of course we can have a little bit of a quarter roof around it to just make sure that we have those nice overhangs on both sides for those additional details. So we want to do that for both of them to nicely break up those walls with a little wooden addition. We of course also want to make sure that we add in the actual windows for these side buildings, and we actually also want to have a little bit of those details going on here above the windows down below. So we'll have our little roofs just forming this nice shape overhead. And here at the top, we want to take out our half beams and have 2 of them stick out here and 2 of them stick out over there, just for some additional details. Okay, then it's time to work on the interior of the tower, as well as of course the last wall over here and the connection up to the other house at the other side. So first of all, we're going to work a little bit on the inside over here. We're going to take out our ceilings, and right here, so after the first 2 layers, we want to make sure that we have these ceilings crossing each other, and then here in the middle we can actually connect those ceilings up to the other side. There in this corner we can have fully connecting them. On the other side is where we're going to start adding in the staircase. So over here we're actually going to make this shape like that and have 1 more over there in that corner. That should leave us a decent enough gap so that we can add in a staircase coming down. So from there we'll have some stairs come down the side just like so. And if we want to have some railings there, the easiest way of course is to start up here. Have a railing there. We'll have some railings along the sides of these little openings, and the reason we have these openings of course mainly because of those windows, so we don't block those off, but you could connect it up if you don't mind that. We want to have a little half railing there. If you want to have railings next to the stairs, you want to have a temporary pillar going right on this corner. Then we can bring out all railings. We need to go through all the snap points until we get the right one that aligns with the stairs. We can have another snap to do that, and then we should be able to take away our pillar and keep the railings down there. Now, in order to connect these 2 buildings, it's rather simple. We'll start with some walls, just filling in these bottom layers like so. We can actually also just already fill in that top layer, have some quarter walls on this side, some quarter walls over here, and then we can have a double doorway right in the middle. Wouldn't add any doors to it. Then of course we want to make sure that we connect both sides of this building. We want to take out some pillars. Then we want to have 2 pillars here and 2 pillars right over there. We want to actually raise these up by another 2 so that we're too high. We should be able to basically line up with this layer over here, and we can bring across these ceilings. So basically a 2 wide building, we can bring that up. Then of course here in the middle we should be able to take out some quarter walls again and create these shapes on both sides. We want to make sure that we have those in place, and then in between again we'll have the double doors on all sides. And then here at the front we also want to have the double door, and we want to have one over there. Of course, with Castle Craft we can turn those into curves, which will look quite nice indeed. And we can then have full walls on the top layers of these walls, and then underneath we can actually have some windows which we can turn into some arrow slits, which will look quite nice. Top layers in here. Also we want to have some full walls, so basically it's a little corridor that we can walk through, and on both sides we will have entrances to the different buildings. And then on the upstairs layer there's actually going to be a connection so that you can walk from one side to the other. Now we can add of course a little bit more details here by adding in a little overhang with some quarter ceilings, and we want to make sure that we snap them rightly to the ceilings already placed. Now with Castle Craft there is actually an easy way to get some supports for these by just having some quarter walls underneath. Again, that does add a few extra structures, so I'll leave it up to you whether you want to add those in. So first off, for the next layer here, what we want to do is have a normal wall right there in the middle section, and to the sides we want to have some of our windows. So both of those will turn into windows, and then of course we want to make sure that we have actual windows in them all, so just like this. And then above it of course we'll need a little bit of a roof. So to start that, we want to take out our roof pieces and just bring them up by 1 on each side. And of course another one right there. And actually using the Castle Craft skin you can have a little window in the middle for these. And then we want to use our quarter roof pieces. We want to make sure that we have them just lining up here in the middle. Now if you do not have overlapping, you'll need to take away those ramp pieces so you can continue with 1 more of these on each side. But if you do have overlapping, you can of course neatly line it up like this. But yeah, with that being added, we should have a nice little roof. We actually want to have some pillars here along the middle of those walls just to make it a little bit more supported, and then some beams going across from one side to another, again to add some more supports. And if you have enough in the structure limit, as I just said, with some Castle Craft variants, we can make these look like some arches for support, which is what we want to do. So we can add a few of these on this side and a few of those on the other side. But again, this only works if you're using the Castle Craft Cosmetic. And then if you want to make this roof look a little bit nicer, of course, you can change it into some ramps here at the edge to make sure that we have a little bit of this overhang going on. You could technically still add them in here, but you don't really need to do that, of course. And there we go. We have the connection from one building to the other, which creates these really cool and cozy corners in the courtyards. And especially from this other angle, this looks really, really nice. But of course, we still need to continue this building on this side. So we'll have full walls going up like this, going all the way across, and another layer on top of it. Over here, of course, we want to make sure that we have some quarter walls. We can have a short doorway, and you can decide for yourself whether or not you want to have an actual door in there, or you can just leave it open as some kind of passageway. Then right here on the top, we can continue with some walls and then go across the top layer like so. Change them into windows and start adding them in. So 6 of them right here in the middle as total. Add in the windows themselves. Then we want to have a little half pillar over here because we're going to add a little bit of a nice addition here. So we want to bring out our ramps. We want to have 3 on this side, 3 on the other side. There we go. And then we can, of course, have a beam sticking out the top like that. We should be able to take away the half pillar. And then if you want some additional detail, you can have a shallow slope wall right underneath it, just to give that wall a little bit more depth to it. And if we then continue here on the inside, of course, we can start thinking about the next layers. We want to take out a little quarter ceiling over here, and we can be sure to add one right in that corner. So the corner here, that's where the stair comes up. Then that corner is where we want to have the top of the next layer. We can change to our stairs, and then of course making sure they just come down from there. It should line up perfectly over here on this layer and get down in that other corner over there. So now we do have an easy way to access it. And again, if we want to make sure that we have some railings around it, we actually need a temporary pillar to be placed. Then we can take out our railings, get through all the snap points until we get the right one attached to the stairs, because at least at the moment of recording, they still don't snap to these quarter stairs, which is quite annoying, but at least there's this little workaround. Then we can take away the railing or the pillar for the railings, and we can start adding in our ceilings going all the way through. We want to, of course, fill in this entire layer like so. And around this, we'll need some of these quarter ceilings again. So we want to just kind of follow that shape around where the roof comes up. We want to have a railing there and a half railing here so that you can easily reach up there. Then over here, we actually want to build the next staircase. And that's going to start from this corner, so the opposite corner from where the previous staircase started. It's only going to be a small one to begin with, so just 2 of them coming down right here. And again, if you want to have that railing, you'll need a temporary pillar. We'll snap to it until we get the right snap point for the railings. There we go. And then of course from there we can continue going up with our staircase. So this one will go all the way to the top layer. So we want to bring that all the way up to the top over here. And of course, again, if you really want to have that railing for, you know, your own safety, you can of course snap that to the same pillar, bring it up like this. There we go. And of course, here in the corner, we can also have a little bit of a quarter ceiling. We should be able to take away the pillar there, and then we can start the final layer of the build. We want to take out our full ceilings. We actually want to expand this build with 1 layer of ceilings on the outside of the tower walls to give it a little bit more depth, and you can even land some pterodons up here once we're done. For now, we just want to start filling in this entire shape, of course leaving some space around that staircase. So we just want to bring it in like this, and before we take out some quarter ceilings again to finish off this area around the staircase. And of course we want to add in our railings themselves so that we get a nice bit of safety there, and that is how you reach the very top layer. Now we do want to add some supports for this build, of course, so we want to take out our slope walls. We can add 2 of them over there, and we can add 2 of them over here, and we can kind of continue going around with these slope walls to add in some supports to the building, just that way that it looks a little bit nicer as well. So we just want to go around all the way like that, so that we have this layer looking a little bit nicer, a little bit more supported before we start building it. And if you want to be able to fly in and out, we want to make sure that we have some entrances. So the middle 2 that we have here, we want to have some walls right on the side of that, and we'll do the same thing over here on the other side. Then of course we want to make sure that we have our pillars around the side of those walls. But let's also get started with, then we want to take out our stairs. Our roofs actually. We want to start placing them down like this. And again, we'll have these entrances, of course, so that we could potentially park some flyers up here. But yeah, you want to at least fill those in. Then, of course, we want to make sure that we take out our corner pieces so that we can add in the corners for the roof, shaping this up quite nicely. And then we can do that for the next layer already too. So just like that, we want to shape up the next layer of the build. There we go. But then, of course, here on these sides where we have the entrances, we can already make sure that we have these corners going back to the outside so that we can connect those pieces up, so we can have some full roofs, of course, at the ends, and then, of course, continuing that back down along these sides over here and around that side as well. And then around the front, of course, we can have a little bit of an overhang going on just like this. Same over here, making sure that we keep that going quite nicely. And then for some additional details, you could add these. If you have the overlapping, you can have one more in that corner, but at least it kind of smooths out the sides of those roofs, makes that a little bit less boring looking. And then on top of here, we can actually make sure that we have some beams going on top of that part of the roof. And then for the final layer on top, of course, we just want to have our corner pieces meet up in the middle for the top of the roof. So that is the way it should look like. And then for some little bit of extra details, you want to make sure that we have our slope walls on the top there. And especially with the Castle Craft skins, you've got some nice variants to make that look more like scaffolding pieces. And if you're building it without Castle Craft, of course, we need to build that a little bit forward. And if you're building it without Castle Craft, you could, of course, also use scaffolding pieces that are within the game, within the frontier, that were part of the Bob Talltales DLC. Yes, yeah, we got some pillars here on this side. So yeah, we want to make sure that that is all the same everywhere. And then we have that whole tower neatly built up. And just for your reference, now the build is about 4.6k, so it's still within the official limit. This is, of course, without any of the additional decorations, but the bare minimum is there. You could start using the base now, and you could start living in the base. Now, there's a few extra details, of course, to add. First of all, if you made all these base, you want to make sure that you add a deco box to add the statue with the Castle Craft skins. But we can even add a few more details here around the outside. To those pillars, we can snap some of these walls. Now, you probably won't want to do this everywhere, but on some of those, we want to snap those walls in. And if it lets us, snap some walls underneath it, and then some slope walls on top of them. And this is to basically add in some extra supports to the building. So what you can then do is basically have some of these shapes looking quite nice as supports. You could even have a little half pillar on top of there. But as you can see, this is going to add a few extra structures. So yeah, if you're running out of the structure limit, you probably don't want to do this, but otherwise it could be a nice addition to just add a little bit more detail to the entirety of this base design. But again, I'll leave it totally up to you whether or not you want to add these in. Yes or no, that is totally a personal preference, but it, of course, will give even more shape to the building. It will make it a little bit less flat around the sides because, you know, we have those quite tall walls up here already for this keep. So yeah, it could be a nice addition. So along this side, I would at least add in these few. We could definitely also add a few of these at the bottom of the tower as support. So again, that will look like this. But yeah, you can see how this is going to add yet again a few extra structures. So this is definitely one of the things you could leave out or could remove if you're running into issues, because of course you need to keep in mind that you need some extra structures left out of the limit so you can still decorate and place things down inside of the build. But yeah, it does add a little bit of extra shape and support to your entire build, so it's definitely a nice way to make it just that little extra detailed, as you can see. So we can do at least those here on this side. Of course, you could add them over here if you wanted to, but we already have some additions there, so they're not as much needed. Over here, there's probably not a lot of places where I would add them, maybe only right between these ones. That's maybe the only place where I'm like, yeah, there it would make sense. So you could add some supports over there too, to again make it a little bit less flat, although this area of course is already the least flat of the entire build. That's not the only additions we can still make, because of course on the inside of this we can also add a little bit more structure to the building, because right now the basement is definitely not the nicest looking place, and there's a little bit of extra structure that we can give it. But again, that is totally optional, because it will add a little bit more to your structure count. If you want to do that, however, you want to remove these two walls first. You actually want to snap in this one, this gate right over here. So there we go. We want to have that gate there. And then we can actually have a full wall coming up here. So that one is going to stay. And then we can have a few of these gateways going all the way across until we meet up with that corner. So that is how we will then kind of decorate that side. And we can have a wall on top of that to kind of close it off. So now we have those archers, of course, as soon as we skin it with the Castle Craft skins. And then we have this little hallway going around the outside for a little bit of extra storage or decoration needs. Then over here on this side, of course, we can go across this line that we have with the edge of the foundation. So we want to basically place a few of these gateways once again. We should be able to go pretty much all the way except for this last one. The last one there, it's where you can have a large wall, and then on the top layer, of course, you can add some more walls above it to once again kind of build in this extra little bit of a dividing wall. It will be very nice arches, and of course, using these gateways, it uses the least amount of extra structures you could be using. Now, then if we look over here on the other side, we basically want to make sure that we line it up with where we have those other arches. So we want to make sure that they are lined up the same way, which means over here we won't be able to have another one. So we'll have a large wall there, and over there on this side we can at least add in these two more, so they should all work out. And then of course we can have another layer of those walls right on top of it. So this will at least give a little bit more structure here to the inside, especially with the Castle Craft skin. Will create some nice arches, and as I said, if you wanted to, you could raise up these walls to make them neatly connect, but that is going to add, what's this pillar here, is going to add a bunch of extra structures. So yeah, that is definitely an option to do when you have more than enough. And here on this side, I don't know why we didn't add that right away, but we definitely also want to have that railing there. But yeah, you can see this whole place has a little bit more structure to it, and we should still be within the limit. But yeah, depending on how much you want to decorate, of course, that is going to keep going up and up and up. So I just wanted to show you some of the options, how you can limit some of your structures. And over here with the Castle Craft skins, you actually probably want to have some pillars on the corners so that you can round off the battlements in a satisfying way. But with that being said, that is how you build this all-in-one castle base, and I do think this is a really cool base for if you want to embrace that medieval theme, and it should offer you plenty of space for all of your survival needs. Now, since it already took a huge amount of time to build this hall again for you guys, I'm not going to show you piece by piece how to skin everything, because that would basically mean building it all over again, and it's going to take way too long. A lot of this speaks for itself. Most of this is just skinning it with the Castle Craft skin and yeah, getting the right look. For the windows at the bottom here, I've used the rounded variant so that we get some nice bars. The dungeon skin for the window so that you get that dungeon look down below. And then up here you can see we have those same windows, but then using the glass skin, which is just the normal castle skins. If you're wondering, that's just the normal castle skins. These windows I kept pointy, but you can see this is how you make the big windows. And on the roof you can go change the variant. You know, you can change the variant to get that window in there. So we have 2 of those on each sides of the building. But for the majority, as you can see, it is relatively easy to get the right variants in place. Then there's the settler tier for some of these really cool wooden structures, which looks very nice indeed. You have the village skins as well for these white structures, and especially keep checking all of the different variants for some of these additional ones. Then we have the village roof on here. Again, you can use some of these to get the dormers. The way I've done this, I think normally there's 2 full walls in here. What I've done instead is done some quarter roofs here, some quarter roofs on that side, and having 1 full roof in the middle if you want to create a centered dormer roof. Add some extra structures, but that's another way where you can have some of those dormer roofs there. You can see I've actually done the same over here. So instead of having 2 normal roofs, there's some quarter roofs on both sides and a full roof in the middle. Again, this adds a lot of extra structures. That's why I've done it differently in the tutorial, to save you those. If you do not have a strict limit like official, of course you're free to do that. If you do have the strict limit of official, you're probably better off not doing it, and you could still add in some of those other dormer roofs to get some really cool details. Here on these tables, of course, we've used a lot of these settler skins and a little bit of the village tier above it. Again, there's a lot of cool variants to get things like this going on, so you can make it look very nice. You can use some of these scaffolding pieces, and then you have the normal pieces here. You can have those curved pieces in there. Just keep checking your variants to get all of these cool looking skins. Then this is actually also the settler roof here on these structures. Again, keep checking your variants to basically skin all of that, and you can get all of these different looks. You of course have the statue skins in there. These are on the medium deco boxes, those standing statues. So that is how you get those soldiers in all of those archways we've made, and it's definitely a really cool way to add some additional details to your base. And I think that is pretty much covering it. The greenhouse is skinned in those settler tiers. This building here is the castle tier for the bottom layer, including this little roof and these side bits. Then we have a little bit of the settler tier for these pillars and these quarter walls at the bottom, and then of course the village tier for most of these walls, as well as the roof on the top, as you can see. But yeah, you get some really cool looking skins if you just check all the variants. You can pick some windows that you like. There's a lot of options in the skin, and that is basically how you get the whole base skin. So it does take a lot of time. It's basically building it all twice, so it does take a little bit of effort to get it all done neatly, but in the end I do think it's worth it. Then here at the little cemetery, this is also just the castle skin. Just go through the variants for the ceilings. As you will see, there's variants here, and you can get these nice stones. This grass texture is cozy cabin, so that's a different cosmetic. You can get a similar effect by painting thatch green or filth color, but you can also of course just only use stone in here and turn it into so differently. But I just wanted a little bit of a cemetery to, you know, remember those fallen teams you might lose along the way of your ARK adventure. But yeah, that's how you skin the base to look like this. And then this is the epic big castle base that you could be using. So we've got these stables over here. Again, going through the variants, you can turn normal doors into a half door for the stables with those settler tiers. So keep checking those because that looks quite nice. That's how we get these nice little stables. And of course, you can access the basement of the whole structure from here too. So we have those stables building here. We have the nice tower here, of course, that you can use as your aviary with a bunch of flyers here on the top layer. And then, of course, we have the rest of the castle base. We have the teleporter here, medium teleporter with these skins, and then going to the variant to get these statues on. This is a feeding trough with the Golden Dynasty skin. We have some of the Astraeos cosmetics here to get these braziers. We have the Astraeos skin here on the transmitter to get this really cool looking structure. And that's kind of how we did all this. This is just a water tank with the Castle Craft skin. We have the little greenhouse over here, which is of course a nice functional addition here where you can grow a bunch of your crops. We have some Astraeos skins on these utilities because I really like the look of those. And yeah, then we can check out what this base has to offer. So this tower is more decorative. I used a lot of the Castle Craft Deco mod, which is separate, to get a lot of these structures in here. But yeah, you have so many different layers to utilize. I've got a bunch of my treasures up here, and I kind of ran out of ideas on how to decorate this all. We've got some bedrooms, additional bedrooms here, and of course we can go all the way to the top where I've parked some pterodons just to show that you can in fact park them up here and fly them in and out if you wanted to. But of course the main utility will be in the main keep and this main building. We do have this tower. We built a little bit of a library in here, and of course you have the aviary up there, and then down here I actually have an industrial forge. This is also the Golden Dynasty skin to kind of make it match the aesthetic a bit more. But this also gives you access, of course, to your basement where you can do a lot of your breeding projects. As you can see, there's a decent amount of size in here for even some bigger creatures like the Rexes, the Utis, the Dinosuchus. We have Gigantoraptor here, some Stegos. All of the things you might need for breeding are present here too. We have the Mega Lab here with the Golden Dynasty skin. We have even a bio grinder at the end if you want to make some kibble. So yeah, you do have a bunch of space down here to utilize, so you can easily get all of your things bred up here. Then in here, we're in the main keep. We have the main crafting hall. So we have the Amissa skin here on the industrial forge. We have some dedicated storage with the Castle Craft skin. We have some vaults here. We have the smithy here. Of course, access to our balconies. We have the grinder here with the Viking skin, because that was the best way I could make it look a little bit more medieval. Some more vaults, etc. around here. And then if we go into the side building here, we basically get into a kitchen area. So I have a bunch of beer barrels, some storage, the industrial cooker here. We have some more of those industrial cookers, as well as the grill, the fridge, and a smithy all down here. And then if we want to go up in the main keep, we can of course take these stairs all the way, and then we have the replicator with the Astraeos skin and a bunch more storage with vaults all around us, and chem benches here. We have the fabricator on the other side. As you can see, plenty of space on the inside here to utilize for you. And then the side building here, we have a cozy living room. So yeah, a lot more cozy in the decorations, but as you can see, still a huge amount of space for you to utilize. And then I added in a little bit of a floor like for these first 3 layers so that I could make a little bedroom up here, which is a little bit more cozy than having that in the big space. But yeah, this is just an example of how you could add the decorations inside and, you know, make it fit your needs. But of course, you might want to decorate it completely differently and get a whole different effect to the base. And then this little courtyard here is definitely one of my favorite areas. Again, using one of these Golden Dynasty feeding troughs for the little bonsai trees, and also of course using a bunch of JVH Landscaping, which is how I've done all of the plants, and added a little bit of greenery. Of course, that is a mod that you need to install on your single player or your own server. If you're on official, you might want to check one of the cosmetics that add some plants in your game, or of course use the shovel and the plant pots from the Bob Tales DLC instead. But yeah, there we go. That is how you build this all-in-one castle base. I really hope you enjoyed this build tutorial, and if you did, please leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already, because this took a huge amount of time to get this all recorded and edited, of course. So if you appreciate that, please show some support on this video. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it big time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video or the next stream. For now, goodbye.